With me today, I have Yemi, Ademolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Achuke Chude, Public Affairs Analyst. But seated already is Achuke Chude, while we're expecting Yemi Ademolekun. Achuke Chude, thank you for joining me on this live this Sunday talk show. Well, we've had two guests on the program, Ambassador Achuke, who commented on developments with ECOWAS and the three countries that were suspended, and that suspension, the sanctions, now lifted. And then also on the second-year anniversary of the Russian-Ukraine war and the fallouts and likely possibilities. And then we had the factional, not factional, National Publicity Secretary of the Labour Party, Abayomi Arabambi, who had a lot to say about the Labour Party. And they just concluded gubernatorial primaries of the party in Edo State that threw up Olumide Akpata on one side and Anderson Asemota on another side. Your take on these two major issues?
Well, the ECOWAS, first, or which of them do you want me to take?
No, take in whichever order that is suitable.
I think for the ECOWAS situation, I think it's the situation is the whole situation is suffering from a foundational issue. I think the very beginning of this, the attempt to address the Niger conflict generated all manners of problems that have germinated to this level where Africa and three of the countries involved have decided to pull out of ECOWAS. And obviously, sanctions were imposed. And the essence of imposing sanction on a country, especially over this kind of crisis, is to put them under very severe economic pressure to be able to bring them to the table, rather than take the matter in another way, maybe through using military force to oust the regimes. And unfortunately, we were thinking that this matter was going to, unfortunately, some of us, felt, or there was this general thinking that perhaps the sanctions might actually work. But the intervention of ECOWAS in the way and manner they have done, by trying to, now it would appear that ECOWAS has kind of capitulated. You would have expected for an ECOWAS that made very serious threats against the junta and then withdrew those threats as a result of the pressure that was imposed on it. You think that somehow they are going to ratchet up the pressure. So for them to get to this level of on their own, because I'm not aware that the junta in the three countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, were pleading and begging them to remove the sanction. Of course, they had talked about the injustice of the sanction before now, but for them to have come together to say, look, they want no part of ECOWAS, I think is an indication that, and then for them to have done that, and then for ECOWAS again to go back to them and try to remove the sanction. Yes, they said it's for humanitarian reasons, but obviously I think it has to do with there are other reasons behind their action. And I think that in a way it's a bit disconcerting. They have lost focus, they have lost ground, and they have shown a sign of weakness. And the regime can only take advantage of the weakness of ECOWAS to press for to do whatever they want to do. Look, when ECOWAS was more forceful and ECOWAS was more in control, and Jonathan Goodluck was involved in all the negotiations before even the coup itself, they could not get the regime to abide by a transitional program. But they were working, some of these things take a bit of time. And so they are working with the regime. They will give them a timeline like Mali of maybe 3 years, maybe 2 years, 18 months timeline. And then the Malian regime refuses, and then they are still, in this back and forth situation. At that particular moment, when ECOWAS was together and united, they were not able to bring this regime to conform to the agreements that they wanted to have with them. Then it is absolutely not now that they have lost ground with this regime, that they are going to get the regime to come back to the fold. They are still talking tough. They don't want to have anything, and they say they are never going to go back to ECOWAS. So it shows a very serious weakening of ECOWAS. That is my reading of the situation. And obviously, perhaps ECOWAS is being motivated by the regime. The three countries are also being motivated by other factors that are also external, beyond them. Don't also forget that the pipeline from Warri in Nigeria here all the way to Europe is also in the works, and they need Niger to be able to pass that pipeline through. And that's why I'm saying that there is a very strong possibility that there's external pressure. Looking at what happened to the Nord Stream that was blown up to prevent gas from going to places like Germany and other parts of Europe. So Europe needs that gas seriously to win away completely from Russian gas and to stop Russia making much more money from while the conflict with Ukraine is going on. And so I think that is why I would suspect that perhaps the external influence that is making these regimes recalcitrant. And so they seem to be driving what is going on within these three countries. And so, like I said, ECOWAS has simply, weakened itself considerably.
Yeah, raised questions about its own credibility. There's also the African Food Reserve, and then also the Multinational Joint Task Force, under the auspices of which this, regional body, the countries that are members, collaborate with regard to terrorism, insurgency, and with the Sahel region being a major trouble spot. It's probably an act of self-preservation for ECOWAS.
No, of course, absolutely, clearly. But again, there is a bit of a problem there, because now the Russians have brought in the African Corps, whatever that means in some of these other countries like Burkina Faso and the rest. And so that means that ECOWAS will have to contend with Russia, indirectly, because when they are contending with the Africa Force, they're also contending with Russia. And some of these forces from Russia are also serving as protective guards for some of this military junta, especially in Mali, where a coup took place the other time, and some of these pushists, members of the junta do not adequately trust their own indigenous soldiers, because they don't know who is planning a coup. And if that is the case, it means that ECOWAS cannot negotiate with these people directly, because they will be also negotiating with Russia at the back of their mind.
Yeah, you've been mentioning Russia. I would also like you to comment on the Russia-Ukraine war, the second anniversary, and what lies ahead. And then, of course, Labour Party.
Yeah. Obviously, look, for me, that war was not a war that was supposed to have been fought. Absolutely. There's no doubt that, Putin might have made one or two strategic mistakes. But the reality is that if you look at some other things that had gone on, and Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson, which the whole world, watched, and a lot of the things that he said, he said, of course, he went back to history and was mentioning names of people who are still living. He mentioned Bill Clinton, and he said, ask him. He mentioned Bill Gates, former CIA director. He said, ask him, and all that. And then he talked about the Minsk Accord, which was agreed, and that if that Minsk Accord itself had held, that war, there would not have been any basis for the war. They wanted assurances. They wanted assurances because from the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was very clear that the promises that were made to Mikhail Gorbachev and then later to Boris Yeltsin was that former satellite states of the Soviet Union will not be absorbed into European Union, into NATO. But Russia was too weak to assert itself, even while that was being breached. And countless other people, even members of the American intelligence agency, had said that it was sheer lunacy for the NATO to continue to expand eastwards because it was a threat to Russia. We all know what happened during the Bay of Pigs. There was no way America was going to allow missiles, in Cuba. And so it is also the same kind of thing that Russia felt threatened. And this is not providing an excuse for Putin. There was also some bit of a faux pas on his part. And then the war itself has ravaged, and taken a lot of lives, both of Russians and of the Ukrainians. And of course, if you look at the refugee situation, something just needs to be done about that war. And I am not sure that constant, supplies of war, materials worth billions of dollars would eventually succeed in bringing bringing Russia, to her knees. So somewhere along the line, they just need to sit down and discuss. And again, some European countries have been talking about the possibility of that. But ultimately,
in these matters, negotiations could take years.
Oh yes, they do.
It's not as if it's
and while negotiations take place, the war continues and people continue to die. So that is the tragedy of wars. They must never be allowed to start. But like some people have said, sometimes war can be business for some people. The defense industrial complex, you need to also test the efficacy of some of the most modern weapons that you have, and you can only test them not firing them into the Baltic Sea. You can only test them in a period of actual war, in the theater of war. So when war starts like that, the first thing people say, the first casualty is truth. It is thrown overboard, and then a lot of politics come into it. That at the end of the day, people even get confused about what even started the war in the very first place. Even when you ask the soldiers after a few years of the war, they'll tell you don't know why they're fighting. And that's the tragedy of war.
Okay, Edo gubernatorial primaries and the crisis in the Labour Party.
Yes, it's again, I won't tell you it's unfortunate because one thing that our politicians have learned is that they've learned nothing. And so we see a repetition of the same thing. And so you're asking yourself truly, because you use all of these things as signposts for determining the wellness and the progress that we have made in our democracy. So if some of the things that happened from the beginning of our democracy from 1999 to date have continued to happen or have gotten worse, you can't say that our democracy is working. So I listened to the last speaker that you had here, and I was cringing when, ethnic issues were being brought into the matter. And I think that was unsavory and unwholesome. These things really should not have any place in our politics. And one is not to say that discussions should not, take place. And it was also good that you intervened to also remind him that even the leader of the Labour Party is from a different, place altogether. So our politicians, I think, should be much more responsive and responsible to the issues of the nation, and also be more careful when it comes to accentuating the country's fault lines. There are many, and we cannot afford to, to do that. But they have always done it. They do that in every election, which is a problem. Let me just, end this by just reminding us again what Atahiru Jega, the penultimate INEC chairman,
former chairman,
yes, said that the weakest link in our democratization process are the politicians. They are the ones that cause all the crises. They are the ones that hit the polity. They are the ones, but I think you hit the nail on you hit the bullseye when you perhaps insinuated, or you were trying to insinuate, and it was denied, of course, that perhaps this might be about a struggle for money. And he said, no. But for me, politicians, when they are fighting over money, they are fighting over position. That's just what it's all about.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Achuke. But let's take a very short break. And when we return, the program will continue. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me, I have Yemi, Ademolekun, and Achuke Chude. Well, Achuke Chude, you responded to our two guests earlier on. Now, Yemi Ademolekun, what do you think of the lifting of ECOWAS sanctions, the crisis in the Labour Party, and also the second year anniversary of the Russian-Ukraine war.
Well, I mean, quickly on ECOWAS, I think for Ambassador Keshi's points, it is very, I can certainly understand how former President Gowon will feel very bad about the work that they'd invested in setting up ECOWAS. But the truth is, ECOWAS has not really lived up to the ideal of what it was set up for. So it's not that this is an abnormality where we are now. But I think I'm hoping that it would force some reflection. And unfortunately, leadership does matter. And the fact that Tinubu became president and then became chair of ECOWAS, given what's happening internally in Nigeria and given what has been thrown at him as a democratic coup, the kind of gravitas that he needs to be able to speak to the military guys in Niger, Mali, he doesn't really have, and in Guinea, he doesn't really have, and that's the truth. I think we'll certainly have probably had different dynamics if someone like Obasanjo was in office, really. But it'll be interesting to see. Sanctions have been lifted, but looking at the cover of this day today, says political and targeted sanctions remain in force. And then the second line says, Tinubu urges Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali to rejoin sub-regional body. So you still have that to deal with, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out. The second one on Ukraine and Russia, I think for me what's not just interesting is also what has happened in Russia over the last 2 years. I don't remember the gentleman's name that died in the crash.
Prigozhin.
Thank you.
Prigozhin,
so he
the
was
Wagner Group.
Thank you. He was taken out, and then a month ago, Navalny has also been taken out.
Alexei Navalny.
Well, I'm glad that his wife wants to step into the role. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. And I think today it was announced that his body will be released to his mom. And it'll be interesting to see if there's anything they're able to pull. I mean, trusting the Russian government, I'm sure they've cleaned up after themselves. But it'll be very interesting how that plays out. I very much look forward to how his wife steps into that role and what she does. And on Labour Party, I love the way you were cautioning Mr. Abayomi and reminding him that he's setting himself up for libel. I mean, so there was Toyin Babalola, there was INEC, really, because INEC as a body can also, beyond Toyin Babalola as an individual, INEC as a body can sue him. And then I think Aburi as well made some kind of allegations. Aburi. And also Peter Obi. I mean, he just went, it was like a clean sweep. What do they call it, scorched earth method. Everybody is coming down today. But to be honest, what I do respect, really, is the fact that he was ready. And he came, I mean, he was showing you CTC after CTC after CTC. And let's also be honest, this is not the first time that a government institution would ignore a Supreme Court judgment. So it's not an abnormality to say that INEC, I mean, I don't know the details of the case beyond what he shared, so let me put that caveat. But it is a statement of fact that there are government institutions that ignore Supreme Court judgments. And the truth of the matter is, nothing happens. So for the fact that they've decided that Aburi is an Edo state, this is his state, so they've decided to make the example in his state is also very interesting. Will be interested in the response. But I particularly, in addition to his scorched earth method, I was also quite, not intrigued, but quite disturbed by the very clear allegations against Peter Obi and sort of ethnic, I don't know what the word is, ethnic something. He said, inner cabinet, mostly Igbos. He said when cars were donated by Innocent, only Igbos got cars. He said that they have been making, excuse me, I think those three things. They've been making allegations against Aburi for a long time that Peter Obi completely ignored. But until an Igbo person now said Aburi was a fraud, that's when Peter Obi quickly came out and published his records. And then layered that on top of the fact that the records were also not complete because there were monies that they are aware of that were not accounted for. I think for me, if Peter Obi certainly needs to respond to that, very clear terms, he needs to respond to that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's quickly take this story, which should also be of interest. The president and chairman of the board of directors of the African Export-Import Bank, AFRISM, has debunked claims that the $3.3 billion loan that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited acquired from the bank will be repaid with an interest rate of 12%. Urama spoke during an exclusive interview with Arise News anchor Ojinika Ojiokpe. He also described allegations of repaying the $3 billion loan with $12 billion as ridiculous, stating that it is one of the best priced loans on the market with a margin of 6%.
The idea of that I've had some people criticize, and a number of criticisms before I go to the one of the criticism, which is that we are going to repay a $3 billion loan with $12 billion, kind of ridiculous criticism. Let me also talk about
ridiculous. You said
is.
Okay. Before you answer that, go ahead.
Because I've never seen where somebody repays a loan, borrow $1, you repay with $12. I would like to be that kind of banker.
So what are the repayment terms? What are the repayment terms of this loan? Just, for transparency.
The repayment terms are, first, the loans are set. It's a prepayment loan. That's one. And we've done this kind of things before. It's not the first time. We've done it not only with Nigeria, with Angola, with Congo, with South Sudan, so many countries where we've done this kind of facility.
What is the interest rate for the loan?
Well, the interest rate on the loan is SOFR, that is the base rate. Which governs, which is the cost of funds, so to say. And so if a President Bank wants to lend money, any other person wants to lend somebody dollars, you start from there as the base. Then you add your margin. And the margin we have, I think, is 6%.
6%?
That is what the margin is.
Okay.
Actually, it is one of the best priced loans in the market today. We are not talking about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We're talking of today, where interest rates have gone up. And we're just hoping that inflation will go down globally so that rates can start going down. And in fact, if those rates start going down, the interest rate on this loan will start also going down.
The full version of Ojiokwe's interview with Afreximbank President Professor Benedict Orama will be on several platforms here on Arise News in the course of the week. Well, very quickly, Achuke, let me come to you. I think the clarification is useful because when Waziri Adamawa Atiku Abubakar raised the concern then that Nigeria was going to pay $12 billion for a loan of $3.3 billion. I mean, many Nigerians were alarmed, and it's good to hear from Professor Benedict Orama, who gave out the loan to help with forex shortage in Nigeria. Well, how that has had any effect, nobody has seen it. But he has told us that the interest rate is not 12%, it is 6%, and that the PDP presidential candidate was misrepresenting the situation.
Okay, well, I think there are briefly, I think there are a few things we might need to, also ask. It is good that they've made this clarification. They are the ones giving out the loan. They should understand the terms. I am not sure that but the federal government should have spoken about it in terms of the interest rate itself. Why is it that they did not come out to say, look, this is actually...
Well, there was a reaction there.
There was a reaction, but I'm not sure. It was dismissed, but there are elements of this which the chairman of Afreximbank is actually talking about. So you expected the Nigerian government to go to the heart of some of these issues and take them one by one and debunk this, that was not done. So fine. So if it is, one other thing we need to ask again is, look, there are 3 entities involved in this. There is Afreximbank, there is the NNPC that is supposed to be the guarantor of that loan, from what we read in many places, in many platforms, and then you have the offshore account that was set up somewhere in the Bahamas. Now, if the loan is being taken on behalf of Nigeria by an offshore company, why is the NNPC guaranteeing it? If the NNPC is guaranteeing it, obviously because NNPC is creditworthy. If the NNPC is creditworthy, why are you not giving the money directly to the NNPC? Why do you have to make the payment to what do you call it, to the platform that was put together for this purpose. Why do you need to do that? If they are creditworthy, they might as well, have collected that loan on behalf of Nigeria. And are they paying back in crude, oil? And then if you have brought it down also to 6% from the 12%, are we talking now about perhaps the possibility that it is $6 billion now that will now be accrued, from the loan that was given by the offshore, partnership that was set up for this purpose, the special purpose vehicle that was set up. So these are questions that need to be answered. Then the tenure of the loan. Well, if some, at least it's a bit unfortunate that we have not seen the full video clip of that interview. Perhaps these questions would also be answered in that particular interview. But it's unfortunate that it has to take, for something that was causing so much controversy in the country, they had to take the chairman of the Afri-Exim Bank to begin to put some of these matters, to bring clarity to some of these issues. You expected the Nigerian government to have done that so that people don't get away with all manners of insinuations that something else has happened again. They are not small people, they are not small boys, those that are in government. They should know the implications of such accusations against them.
Yemi, any comment?
Nothing to add. That's just...
Okay, let's take this story. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Lateef Fagbemi, has called on Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, to shelve its proposed nationwide protests. The Congress had on February 16 announced it will embark on a nationwide protest on Tuesday and Wednesday this week in response to the economic challenges facing the country. The decision stemmed from a 14-day ultimatum issued to the federal government over widespread hardship. However, in a letter addressed to the lawyer to the NLC, Femi Falana SAN, dated February 23, 2024, the Justice Minister reminded NLC of a subsisting court order restraining the union from embarking on any industrial action. Well, I'm sure Femi Falana SAN will have responded. I think I've seen, a reaction to that effect, in which Femi Falana SAN was reminding the Attorney General of the Federation that the two ex parte orders by the National Industrial Court, would seem, to be ridiculous and irrelevant because the Constitution of Nigeria guarantees the right to protest. And beyond that, in the All Nigeria People's Party case, that's IG Police versus AMPP, the conclusion, the gravamen of that case is that, look, people can protest without police permit. Yeah. And that therefore, his responsibility as a lawyer is to advise, and he has done so, the NLC to protest peacefully. And that to that extent, nobody should talk about contempt because there's no contempt in place. The other part of it is that TUC, the sister union, is saying that NLC is taking a unilateral action, that they are not part of it. We don't know whether this is a reflection of any divide and rule game on the part of the government. Yemi?
Now, this one I have a comment on, certainly. And I think that is fundamental. I remember the early days of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. I think it was actually also Mr. Femi Falana that represented a case that we were supposed to have taken permit from the police. People inform the police so that the police can do their jobs, i.e. protect protesters and ensure that people who want to foster trouble are kept away. That is the job of the police. So we don't write to get permission to protest. We write to inform so they know how to sort of organize. And I remember a classic case of when we did the One Voice protest in Lagos that Chubaba inadvertently started. But the Commissioner of Police at the time, his name, drawing a blank at the moment, was on ground. He was there, mobilized his boys. He's now a special advisor to either the Oyo State government. Anyway, his name escapes me at the moment. But anyway, he ensured that his guys were on ground to protect protesters. That's the role of the police. Now, starting tomorrow, I know 2 or 3 civil society organizations are starting their protest as a prelude to the NLC protest. But again, what we've seen is, and we actually mapped it, in 16 states since last year, there have been different types of protests, from Naira crunch to cost of living crunch. So the fact that NLC Again, similar to Occupy Nigeria, the fact that NLC is now organizing a protest, they're not the first. Citizens have on their own organized and gotten on the streets to express their frustration. So for the federal government to be using the law or the courts to tell people not to express what is a problem, again, just reinforces the disconnect from the reality of Nigerians, which is why the state visits, which we're not talking about, became such a conversation on social media. That given what is happening in Nigeria, is this the time that you want to say you want to go and do a business summit in Nigeria or in Qatar? So anyway, yeah, should be interesting.
Well, Achuke?
Yeah, let me start from a different perspective and hopefully drive it home. Look, there have been so much expectation from Labour over the years. Labour's primary responsibility is not to the Nigerian people, it's not to deliver Nigerians from some of these issues. Their prime responsibility is their constituency. The other one is ancillary, and that is because every member of Labour is a Nigerian citizen and faces the consequences of bad governance sometimes, like what is happening today. So they also have a duty to respond to some of the negative social, economic realities that we're facing. But if you look at the trend of activism, in this country, the past 30 years, it was not driven by Labour, it was driven by civil society. A lot of people have forgotten that. The CDs, the Campaign for Democracies, the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights and all that. Labour would always join the fray, on behalf of the Nigerian people. They would always join. But over time, maybe as a result of the increasing weakness within civil society itself, Labour began to take on that responsibility. And I think it became a responsibility that was too much to bear. And so people now got fascinated or got used to the fact that when there is a problem, they must call on Labour to rescue them and all that. And that, in a way, is a bit unfair to Labour. So let them do their constitutional role. And perhaps, and just like Yemi has said, perhaps it is because of the absence of continuous Labour involvement in some of what is happening today that is now engineering people engineering people to say, look, we can do this on our own. So if Labour wants to join, then they can join. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with what Labour is trying to do. This is not about convenience. It's about the survival of the Nigerian people. It's about the survival of members, of members or even of Labour itself, and as well as other Nigerians. So it is key.
Just to add, the Commissioner of Police then was Fatai Owoseni, who was fully on ground to ensure that citizens and protesters were protected. That's the police's role, not to stop people from protesting.
Thank you very much, Yemi Ademolekun, and thank you, Achuke Chude. I look forward to seeing both of you next Sunday.
It's been a pleasure.
You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati from our entire team here in Lagos. It's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.